I set my controller down and turned to look at Jamie. "So, do you want to go out into the woods one last time?" I raised my eyebrow at him and smiled. "Yeah," he said excitedly, and he jumped off the couch. Then, embarrassed, he cast his eyes down at the floor. "Yeah, you know, if you want to, that's cool." "Cool, let's go." I grabbed his hand and ran out the front door, grabbing my strategically placed backpack on the way. Jamie didn't even notice it. He was walking faster than I was. When we had gotten a decent way into the trees, Jamie turned around and looked briefly at my face before casting his eyes to the ground. He rubbed the back of his neck. "I've actually, wanted to kiss you all summer." I was stunned to silence, absolutely dumbfounded that Jamie had found the guts to say anything like this. I knew I needed to fill the awkward silence left in its wake, so I did the only thing I could think of. I leaned in and kissed him. It was the awkward first kiss of two 12-year-olds, but it made me feel warm and sent a flight of butterflies swirling into my stomach. So I actually really did like Jamie. How about that? I let him go, and his face was the same shade of red that I imagined mine was. He quickly changed the subject to how long he'd wanted to ask me out, but that he didn't think I liked him back. We walked for a while, carrying on this conversation, him oblivious to his surroundings, me subtly leading the way. It took him stumbling over the tracks to break off his monologue, and finally noticed the backpack. He looked at me like I'd punched him in the face. "You can't be serious." "Jamie, I know, but look. This is the last time I'm going to see you in a really long time, and I want to remember today. We'll only be out for 2 hours max. We'll be back before they even realize we're gone." Jamie stared at the tracks for a minute and seemed to be considering it all. I held my breath until he finally let out a deep sigh. "Okay." "Oh my God, Jamie, He held up his finger, cutting me off. "But we follow the tracks the entire time, and we turn around after an hour." "Okay." I was so excited that I hugged him. It would be the first and last time I ever did. As we walked, we talked about all sorts of mundane things, stopping only to make sure we were still on the tracks. It felt like we had only been walking for 45 minutes, but when Jamie checked his watch, it had been 3 hours. That's weird. It hasn't been 3 hours. It says it's 5 o'clock. He trailed off. "I swear we left just after 2. It can't be 5. Dude, your watch is busted." I gave him a playful shove. He raised his eyebrows at me and smiled. "Even so, we should probably turn around." He wasn't wrong. The sun was setting. The shadows were long, and, looking around, I wondered if it really was 5 o'clock. But I wasn't ready to give up just yet. As we had been walking, I'd noticed something taking shape off of our right. A large mass, maybe a quarter mile away. It was denser than the area around it, and seemed to have clean, man-made lines. "Jamie, look!" He turned. "Yeah, I was hoping you hadn't noticed it. It's a long way off, though. We would never find the tracks again." "Yes, we would. Check it out." I triumphantly pulled the spray paint out of my backpack. "It's for the trees." He took the can and shook it, then made an experimental X on a nearby tree. "Okay, but I get to do the spraying." I didn't argue. The closer we got to the mass, the more it took shape. First, we could tell it was a building. Then, we could tell it was a church. By the time we got to the front door, we were looking at a very old, dilapidated chapel. Remembering my camera, I took a picture of the wooden plaque over the door. Whatever had been written on it had long ago worn away. We walked around the church in awe. The building was small, maybe 500 square feet. The windows were, surprisingly, all intact, but were so caked with dirt and grime we couldn't see anything inside. "How do we get in?" I asked quietly. "I don't know, but we're gonna figure it out. Wait until my brother hears about this. I mean, holy shit, look at this place." His excitement was contagious. The front door had a pull handle, but try as we might, we couldn't seem to open the door. "Do you think it's locked?" I asked as I watched Jamie struggle with it. "Yeah, maybe. I mean, it must be. There was a door around back, though. The door at the back was a lot more sympathetic, and let us in with relative ease. We were standing in a small room with an old wooden desk attached to the wall. There was a small fireplace, and old portraits hung up around the tiny office. The people in the pictures were all standing in front of the same maroon background, and were looking down at us disapprovingly. Books were scattered everywhere, mostly in a language I'd never seen before. The floor was covered in dirt, and a pair of old shoes were laying haphazardly in one corner. "Whoa," I said in awe. "Yeah, whoa." I looked over at Jamie, who had a huge smile on his face. He was holding up a cross and a piece of paper. "What is it?" I walked over to see. "It's a list of names. There's like 60 people on this list. Maybe a town census? Let me see." I pulled my flashlight out of my backpack and shined it on the parchment. "Deepwood. Do you think that's the name of the town? All these names are crossed out. All except this one." I pointed to a name at the very bottom. "Maybe it was the plague." "You think it's a list of the dead?" Jamie shrugged. "Makes as much sense as anything else." I walked over to the desk and leaned against it. "Why do you think they left?" "I mean, look. There's a jacket or something on that chair, and shoes over there. The town pastor or whatever, he just took off and left everything like this? Or died," said Jamie as he folded the paper and put it into the backpack. "Yeah, died. Either way, it must have been creepy as hell to be alone in here." I stared at one of the portraits for several long seconds. The young woman painted there seemed to be staring down at me with a very accusatory look. It made me incredibly uncomfortable. I was so absorbed in the paintings that I didn't notice the slow creaking from overhead until the ceiling cracked loudly as it started to cave in. I screamed and covered my head, but the next thing I knew, I was lying on my back over the threshold of a door, Jamie on top of me, protecting his head. "Ah, thanks," I mumbled as I gently pushed Jamie off of me. "Don't mention it." Jamie climbed to his feet and brushed himself off. I glanced behind him at the office, which was now filled floor to ceiling with decaying debris. "Jamie, that was our way out." "That's okay. We can unlock the front door now that we're inside, or break one of the windows." If the back of the office was unsettling, the chapel was downright disturbing. Even though the grimy windows allowed very little sunlight in, I could make out 8 rows of pews lining a narrow aisle and a tall podium at the front of the chapel. Jamie and I stumbled around the small nave, breaking windows on either side with pieces of wood we had found. The sun was still setting, and I wondered how much of a difference the muted light would make. When I broke the last window on my side, I turned back around to survey the chapel, disappointed that the light wasn't much better. The room itself seemed to repel light. The wooden pews were completely rotted. In fact, the wood we had used to break the windows of the church were leg stands from the front row. The narrow aisle in between the rows of pews was littered with leaves and rotted wood. But that was nothing compared to what sat upon the altar. It wasn't even a podium as I had thought earlier. It was a statue of the crucifixion, but unlike any I had ever seen before. The paint had been worn away on every part of the statue, except the blood of the crucifixion wounds, which stood bright and realistic, and seemed to be oozing before our very eyes. The only other surface left untouched by the decay of time was the face of Jesus. The details of his face were so incredibly minute and perfect, and he had the same accusing eyes as the portraits in the pastor's office. He seemed to be staring directly at me, though he was across the room from me. The statue's stare awarded me with an edge of panic, and I suddenly realized that we needed to leave. We weren't wanted here. I had the sudden feeling that we were trespassing on some sort of hallowed ground. We had found the church. We had documents proving we had been here. And now it was time to go.